Recording in progress.
Different here. All right, welcome everyone. We are starting with our first meeting of the 2023 canvassing board. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, as this is a midterm meeting.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I will officially call the meeting to order for November 13th for the canvassing board and ask Clerk Easter to call the roll. Okay?
I'm just gonna call it from up here. So I didn't get myself a mic today. Hello, everyone. Councilmember Keen.
Here.
Councilmember Bransford.
Here.
Councilmember Wall.
Here.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
Here.
Councilmember Palmer.
Here.
Councilmember Dennis.
Here.
Council President Carlson.
Here.
Mayor Norton.
Present. All right, I'd ask for a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All right, any discussion? Councilmember Keen? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. All right, motion carries. Moving on to our reports and recommendations, which is the canvass of the November 7th, 2023 special municipal election results. Clerk Geisler, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President, Mayor Norton, Council President, council members. We're here today to canvass the results of the election. And we're just going to show you a couple quick slides here just to show you some of our turnout numbers. We had 73,442 registered voters at 7 a.m. on election day, which I did just notice consequently was 4 less than last year. So we'll have to work on that before next year. We had 19,767 total votes cast, 348 persons registered at the poll on election day. 3,001 regular military and overseas absentee and mail ballots were cast, and we had 46 polling locations with 580 election judges this time around.
Wow.
Kudos to everyone. Here we go. So here's a summary of the question. And Rachel, would you just pop that up to the top? Thank you. And you can see that the result there was 10,567 votes cast in the affirmative with a 53.6% vote for yes for our for the sales tax renewal. And I'll just note, if anyone's wondering why I'm not going over school board results as well, because they will be canvassing their result officially tomorrow. And so we'll be signing off on the abstract because we were the administrators, but they will canvass their actual result tomorrow. So in case anybody's wondering. And so that's really it. I just want to say thanks to all of our election judges and particularly to Parks maintenance teammates who really stepped up to help us out and do all the time, frankly, but they did delivery for all of our equipment so that we didn't have to have the county do all of that. And Olmsted County Elections was a great partner as always, and everybody on my team who's all elections all day on election day. So thanks to everybody who contributed.
All right, are there any questions of Clerk Geisler? Councilmember Keen?
Clerk, I noticed we had about 15% or just in that range of absentee voting. Two questions. One is that about what we expect now and going forward, or is that just this is a smaller election? We're not sure. And then the second thing is you mentioned regular military, overseas, and mail-in ballots. Are those mail-in all the way up till the voting day, or is that mail-in up to like a week before? Or I just want to make sure I know what I'm reading when I see that number.
Sure. So Councilmember Keen, council members, to answer your first, I'll answer your second question first because that's the one that I remember, is it's right up until election day. And
Okay.
Those ballots are accepted till 3 p.m. I believe is the number, is the time. But I'm not 100% sure I'm giving you the right time, but it's
Okay.
through election day. And then the 3,001 regular military and overseas absentee ballots and is 15%. Hard to say. I don't think we really have an expected number. I don't think we have a good projection for what post-COVID mail-in balloting is going to look like. We did expect this turnout to be similar to the special primary we had to fill Congressman Hagedorn's seat last year, and it was actually a little bit better than that.
Okay.
But hard to say is my answer.
Okay. Nope.
Where I think next year will be sort of a new baseline that we're gonna set for post-COVID. What's gonna look like for people who are mail-in voting now that we're on the flip side or on the other side of COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other discussion or other questions? All right, a motion?
I'd move to accept and verify the canvas results as presented.
Second.
All right, Keen and Bransford, go ahead, Councilmember Keen, any further?
Nothing, again, just a thanks one. I was surprised looking at some of the numbers with the number of 580 election workers, and that's really a major lift for this time of year and off year election. So appreciate the work that went into getting this result and watching it come out that evening.
And I know we're mid-vote, but if I could just make one comment to that note is that during a regular general year, we have upwards of 700 to 800. And so, we tried to gauge what we needed for what we thought the business was going to be like, but we still have to be as absolutely accessible as possible, following the procedures. And so that number, it seems like a big number, but it'll be bigger next year.
Thank you.
Other discussion? All right, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you so much, Clerk Geisler. Is there a motion to adjourn our canvassing meeting?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned. And we will now flip over to our study session, and we're talking about our council rules and procedures, and Administrator Zelms is ready to go.
I'm almost ready to go. I'm going to get an assist from our partner in the back to get the PowerPoint up and running, and then I will take it away with the magic wand. So thank you for your prior discussions of the council rules of procedure. We also wanted to present you with an idea for next year's calendar that would look different than this year based on feedback we've had throughout the year and frankly throughout the last about 2 years from council, just sort of the experience of meetings that we've been having with the pace of the meetings, and obviously lots of business before you, both in study sessions and in your regular meetings throughout the year. So we finally got the right date up there after a lot of hard work from our teammates in the city clerk's office. So putting this together in a way where it was visible in multiple different ways and that we can use the template in the future if future councils have changes to their council rules of procedure. So just a big thank you to everyone in the clerk's office that contributed to making this viewable. So just starting off, a couple of things to be thinking about is whether or not we do want to rethink the pace of council meetings and study sessions and separating out the study session from the council meeting day and having Mondays with study sessions and Mondays with only council meetings. So that'd be less frequent, but hopefully lend itself to more both learning and also providing more policy feedback in the study sessions. And obviously there's some onus on staff to be able to make their presentations in such a way where it encourages some of that interaction. We are hopeful that eventually we will get out of the supply chain and the work of our contractor and be able to have some of your study sessions in room 104. They're actively in there right now working on that. And hopefully we have all of the equipment on hand. So this would also provide an opportunity for being around the table. Really lowering the saturation on days where you have, obviously, we don't always know how heavy your meeting will be. It depends on the public hearing schedule, what the development calendar is looking like, et cetera. And then really looking much more closely at conferences, holidays, elections, and school breaks to try to make this calendar as viable as possible. It would also provide an opportunity to update the starting time for a regular business meeting if the council was interested. And again, we have a list of dates just for general consideration where we might want to try to avoid for this or other committee meetings in order to be respectful of different holidays that are celebrated in Rochester. So you can also see a list here of multiple other changes. So this is started with the council initiated action, continued to a council study session in March that was delayed after we had an unblizzard. And then we did incorporate all in one place the resolutions that were passed about the council live stream, the resolution that was passed about council travel and training. We did need to make changes based on some legislative changes about the open meeting law that happened during the last legislative session. And I'm not sure what the last bullet says. Oh, team recommendations. There you go. So just moving forward, again, the recommended city council meeting calendar is in the packet, but the major changes, if the council agreed to them, would be to have sessions held on non-business meeting days. So your business meeting day would be about business, and your study session day would be more about that policy feedback and intermittent feedback throughout different work that teammates are working on. We would be looking at maybe a slightly longer time to have in those study sessions since you don't have as much of a cadence having those every week. Looking at the city business meeting again, maybe adjusting forward to help to address some of those later night meetings. Doesn't mean you'll never have one. Sometimes there's lots of discussion that happens at council meetings. That's what they're for. But then also making sure that we avoided some key dates where folks may have family challenges, being able to have the meeting in that space. So you do have a copy of the calendar in your packet, and I guess maybe now would be a good time to sort of give an example of what a study session can be for information and then feedback. So if there's any feedback about those recommendations about the calendar or thoughts about that.
Councilmember Palmer?
Well, I would support, the calendar and the study sessions being changed and the regular business meeting being at 6 p.m. So I would support all three of those.
Me too.
Councilmember Wall?
I note in suggested that if we can't meet on a Monday, we would meet on a Wednesday, not uncommon, but then it goes to 7 p.m. instead of 6. So I wonder if we want to be consistent between Monday and Wednesday.
I think that is an error, so we will catch, good catch.
And I would guess under Rule 1B, we can set study sessions whenever we want. We could have them on a council meeting day if we needed to have extra sessions.
Certainly, either on a council meeting day or if we had enough lead time to be able to make sure that we had a quorum of people. It's something that we could look at for either a longer session or if you were reviewing something very meaty to look at multiple sessions on either on a council day or on a day that works, although that can be very challenging to schedule for 8 people and city teammates, depending on what the topic is. So, but you always have that opportunity. And we would, of course, recommend that if we felt something was really important to get in front of council.
Councilmember Dennis, then Kirkpatrick?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So we already discussed the meeting time change and that was decided that we were going to have at 7 p.m. Why is this being brought up now? And who's bringing this up? Is it
Sure.
the
So
city
team is
staff?
bringing up the recommendation. Great question. Based on feedback that we've had throughout a variety of different meetings during study sessions where folks have been concerned about the pace of the study session and then needing to go to the council meeting. But we've also had concerns about how late the meetings are going and just the general cadence of the meetings. It's probably been brought up in multiple different ways over the last year and a half for multiple different people. So it's an opportunity for the council to do this if you so choose. If for some reason it did not go well next year, there is the opportunity, of course, for the city council always to change their rules with a 5/7 vote. But this seemed like it would be something that we could try to address some of the concerns that have been raised by multiple different elected officials over the last, maybe it's been 2 years.
Okay, so multiple elected officials are bringing this, or is the city staff bringing this to the
The
agenda?
city staff is bringing this forward based on concerns that have been raised by multiple elected officials over the course of the last 18 to 24 months.
Okay, well, I haven't heard any of the concerns, but what I do have a concern with, so first off, are we voting for this then the first business meeting in January? Is that correct? Is that when we're voting for this?
Council member, you would be voting for this likely on November 20th because you would need to establish your calendar for 2024.
Okay, and then, so there's a plethora of reasons why 7 o'clock has always been the city start time. I've looked back at many past councils and it's always been 7 for many reasons. A lot of times people get off work at 5 o'clock. And so if you're going to come sit here in the audience to speak an open comment, I've called up people today and asked them, when do you come? And they said, oh, 5:15. I'm sorry, they come about 6:15, 6:30 because they come half hour early so that they can get a spot on other comment open comment. And so if you move the whole meeting an hour early, That means people who get off work, let's say at 5, they get out the door, try to drive, they have to race straight here without any food, any breaks, if they can make it here, to sign up for other open comment at 5:30 to in order to be speaking at 6. So many residents, every resident I've talked to really likes it at 7 for the reason that it enables them to get here on time, have a break, have dinner. Obviously, when you talk about city staff who are many obligated to be here, they have to get off at 4:30, 5 o'clock and have a dinner, come back. So this is nothing to do as much with city council as it has to do with the residents, who is why we are here, right? We're representing and amplifying voices of constituents for them to be able to make it here on time. And so it has always, to my knowledge, and please correct me, has always been at 7 o'clock. And for that reason, to serve the best interest of our community. And then we've already commented a lot about needs here on council, and an hour is not going to make, if it's going to go until midnight or 1 a.m. Okay, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. If it's going to be a long meeting, having an extra hour early is not going to be a make or break. But having that extra hour to enable people who are going to have to run home, residents who are caretakers for whatever reason, that hour makes a huge difference. Just scientifically, if anyone on council believes in science, having dinner, having food, having mental health breaks, that's all important. But then having the ability for residents to get here on time, sign up for council. I mean, it would be wonderful if we have unlimited council time for them to speak and open comment. But a lot of them want to be here right away to make sure that guarantee a spot and time to speak. And then staff. I mean, there's how many city staff on a regular council meeting are there at the beck and call of the council? There's probably about 20, 30.
Councilmember, just to the staff question, most staff don't leave and come back. Most of them stay at work and come directly to the meeting.
Okay, well, and then everyone has their choices to make, but I feel like those having an ability to have supper should be a choice. So I don't believe this is broken. I think all the feedback I've heard is that the 7 o'clock time is essential for people. I looked up the definition of tone deaf, people who don't have the sensitivity of looking through other people's perspectives. I feel there's so many perspectives out there, DEI, different people who have different needs, and basic supper is, I believe, a reasonable request to allow people to have. So it's not broken. I don't know why it's being proposed to change it, and I don't know why paid city staff is doing this instead of the council. Thank you.
So I'll just, again, say that paid city staff brings
Ms.
forward
Carlson,
council items.
just to interrupt, but we did meet at 6 o'clock during COVID, and so that worked out very well. It takes 5 of us. I don't know if there's 5 who are in favor of this. We're going to nod our head. If there's just 1 or 2 who are against it, then let's move on.
Yeah. Would you like to provide a response, or should we move on?
I think it's fine to move on. I did just want to point out that we also have some unprecedented different ways for people to be able to be heard, either in open comment, direct conversations with city council, email to city council, which we provide to all city council before the meeting. We also have people able to sign up online and join online to be able to do their open comment, and folks don't have to stay for the meeting if they came at 6 p.m. Plus the folks that are here for public hearings would be able to actually have their public hearing come up more quickly in the agenda by starting at 6 p.m. So for folks that don't want to stay until midnight and they have some ability to have a little bit more leeway when they might start the meeting. So those are just a few thoughts about all the different ways that we try to accommodate people for the city of Rochester, as well as the fact that there's quite any number of people who don't work a 9-to-5 job in the city of Rochester and work shift work or some other type of work that would allow them to prioritize coming to open comment occasionally. We typically don't get people over and over, and they can only speak once per month.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick?
Well, I think there's been enough dialogue about this, pros and cons. I didn't recall meeting at 6 PM during, I remembered 6:15. So I know we can change it. It's our prerogative, and I believe sometimes change is good. I did look back through the 20 years worth of council meetings that were available, and they really remain consistent at 7 PM. So I'm really in favor of it staying at 7 PM, just because it hasn't changed. However, I am in favor of doing the study sessions just on the second and the fourth Mondays as is suggested. The key there, however, is just to make sure that we never stress ending at 6:30, because oftentimes we have run beyond 5 o'clock if there's stuff to talk about that's important. And that means that what we had scheduled was 3 hours for study sessions over the course of a month. So I want to make sure that we maintain that 3 hours of study sessions. So we're not losing time with each other. We're not losing time learning. We're not losing time interfacing with the public if they were to be participating in a study session. So I like that idea of just doing it from 3:30 to 6:30 or later on those chosen Mondays.
Thank you. Mayor Norton.
Thank you. I am pleased with the recommendations that have come forward. I have watched this council have the late night meetings. I watched the legislature have late night meetings, and I can tell you we don't function at our best at 11 and 12 o'clock. So if we can move this up an hour and end earlier, I think that's a positive thing for good governance. So I'm supportive, and I think we are making the changes for the city council study sessions. I think having less of them, having them run a little longer is probably good, and it allows us to be fresher for our city council meetings rather than going back to back. I do think people that work at 8 to 5, of which, you know, as you pointed out, we're in a shift society here. I do think that still gives them time to go home and grab a quick dinner and get to our meeting. The one thing I would ask, however, and this is more of a question, some of the other governmental bodies allow people to sign up early rather than having come 30 minutes early to sign up and wait in line and rush to get their name in. If they could just call in, or we could find some other way for people to let you know in advance, I'm going to be there. Might we consider that moving ahead?
I would let Clerk Geisler speak to that, but I believe we already have that option with, I mean, to a degree, when people send in their comments, we could incorporate that, but we were trying not to overly stack the deck with people who speak regularly.
Yeah, thanks, Allison, or Administrator Zelms. Mayor Norton, council members. I think that that's something we could discuss, and the hesitation to that in general is to continue to provide an opportunity for different people to sign up on different times, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we're listening to, you know, and then we do have the once a month rule, so that does help. But for people who are going to sign up in person, we want to not have those slots filled when somebody came to the meeting to sign up at 6:30, but we've already filled them all with people who called in advance. People who call in also get rotated in, and so that's another option. And then, of course, people are able to submit comments in writing or via email, and those get circulated in advance anyway. So certainly open to discussing it with concerns registered about just giving access to people that aren't regular attenders of council meetings. I think that's always our biggest concern.
I absolutely understand that. And I hope we do have a little more discussion about this, because I do think we also have the people that come in on the computer and they're not signing up. They're just coming in on the computer and we're hearing them. And so I think we should look at ways to make sure we're fair and as inclusive as possible.
And my recollection is that typically when we still have time available, Council President asks anybody in the audience that hadn't signed up if they wanted to speak, that they come forward, and that has happened before.
All right, Councilmember Keen?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. I do generally support the calendar. When I look at the 2024 calendar, I do look at it as more focused, less meetings and more focused. And I believe the 6 o'clock is really a reference to the fact that we don't have a 3:30 meeting right before it. So I think that's just a good use of the calendar. As far as study sessions, I guess I want to make the comment here that many times these are, we call them study sessions, educational. Many times this is the staff looking for feedback on things that are going to come to us. And I just want to say this for my peers, we should come prepared to try to say what our opinions are, and these are what our direction is to help staff prepare the sort of policy that we want to see coming back at us. We started getting into this open comment, and I didn't want to get into too much. We spoke about this at our March 13th meeting, and I don't think there was consensus on making these changes. I, for one, would rather see us give much more attention to the people in the room than the people online, but I'm not sure that's consensus here. I know we tried to talk about it and I didn't think that came up there, that I think there does seem to be too much deference to someone who's not here as opposed to the people who came to speak. So, but that's an opinion. I think I tried to voice that on March 13th and I don't think I got any consensus with it. So, but I'll bring it up again.
I appreciate you bringing that up. We're going to talk more about open comment later in the meeting, so let's hold those thoughts for now. But Councilmember Wall, go ahead.
My support of the 6 PM start comes from a previous position in this city that involved large meetings for people, scores, hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people. And we actually did poll, and the earlier in the evening, the more likely we were to get participation, especially by the youngest and by the oldest. At 6 o'clock, we actually got our best results. At 7 o'clock, it was less, and if we started something at 8 o'clock, it was bad.
Appreciate that perspective. Councilmember Kirkpatrick?
I had an open comment, but if we're going to get to that later, I'll reserve for that. But are we also talking about the calendar right now? Or are we going to wait to discuss that later? Yeah. I guess I have a couple of concerns with the calendar. I noticed that some of the fifth Mondays have had meetings added to them. And I was always aware that our fifth Mondays were a free Monday. So perhaps we could just look at that. And then also, and I know we've changed this and we've talked about, shifting our council calendar around, but maybe it's because I interned with Councilmember Bilderbach for so long. I was always aware that if it was a holiday on Monday, the meeting would be held the following Wednesday. So in other words, Labor Day is Monday, we're supposed to have a meeting on Wednesday. President's Day is Monday, we're supposed to have the meeting on Wednesday. And we haven't followed that. And I'm not saying we have to adhere to old rules, but it seems like this calendar, there's sort of a mishmash of a holiday on Monday, but then we don't go the Wednesday. And then you've left some fifth Mondays open, but then some of them are filled. So I'm just maybe looking for consistency on that, maybe?
Sure. In order to, I'll just start and then invite Clerk Geisler. In order to avoid all of those other holidays, as well as all of the other planning and get the number of meetings in that are likely necessary to keep developments moving forward and keep things in front of council with the pace that is necessary for the public hearings, et cetera. There's two fifth Mondays that would have a study session. So again, not a voting meeting. And then there is, I believe, January is somewhat awkward, but that's because there's multiple holidays in January. And then you end up on the Wednesday, which is oftentimes sort of, it changes our whole agenda process. It changes when people are expecting to be here. That can be surprising to people. So we were trying to go for the consistency, but also be able to avoid some of those other dates that are maybe not celebrated federal holidays, but are celebrated by others in the community and could be conflicts for them to really be wanting to be at this meeting versus celebrating whatever they celebrate.
Okay, got it. So just clarifying that was kind of a conscious thing. This is the way it's shaken out this year.
And
It's
to get
just
the,
for January and April. So
Yeah,
January is
got
the
it.
first and
Yeah. Okay.
and
Super.
April gets challenging with the Rochester Public Schools schedule. So
Right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
thanks.
all right, I would just say that I also support this and appreciate, I was somebody who heard from staff that there were some concerns about the timing and how we're best using our energy and making sure we're giving the best feedback possible to staff. So appreciate these thoughtful changes. And I know you did a lot of work to land on this recommendation, so I appreciate that.
This is calendar F. So we went through a lot of
Yes.
different iterations to
The
get to something.
the calendar and the study session approach, so really appreciate that. And I just wanted to second that the public hearings end up getting really late sometimes, so it's also in consideration and appreciation for people who are coming to have their business taken care of, and sometimes are sitting here for many, many hours, so like the 6 o'clock start. All right, moving on.
Okay, so the rest of this is really focused on, obviously, if these are adopted, they would be adopted within your council rules of procedure because you lay out your meeting times and well, not the exact dates, but generally lay out meeting times, et cetera, in your council rules of procedure and code of conduct. And so the rest of this is really focused on that. And you've seen this before. I tried to clean this up a little bit, this version of it. But really the intent, again, is to be more focused in how our meetings work and have the team be better at presenting and gaining feedback, as well as making the meetings in such a way where we're able to get more of that feedback when you're not worried about the next meeting that's going to be happening later in the night, which may have a lot of very meaty topics on it, and you actually vote during those meetings. So a little bit more pressure on those evening meetings than the study session calendar, but certainly appreciate the ability to work through this to stay at the policy level here, so that then when the staff is going back and using their professional training to implement and bring back the details to you for a vote, that we have a good sense, not a vote in the study session, but hopefully a good sense of where there might be concerns and where there's alignment across the council. And obviously there's not always going to be 100% alignment, but we do try to want to come back to the voting meetings with something that's well fleshed out and has at least considered what the concern might be and maybe explain why either it was incorporated or it wasn't. So again, just trying to stay at that purpose and vision and providing the runway for the team to be able to deliver on the actual result that was voted on. The Council of Rules of Procedure, there are a couple of changes that came through from state law. So during the last legislative session, a lot happened. And one of the things that happened is sort of enshrining the ability to join remotely to the meeting, not from a public space, if the elected official is ill. So that was an option that happened during the pandemic and changed around a few times. And now that is an option up to 3 times per year if someone's either deployed or if they have a medical reason not to be at the meeting. Then they could join from a non-public location. Otherwise, if someone were to join a voting meeting, for example, we would need to post with the agenda their public location. They have to be publicly accessible in order to be able to do that business remote, unless, again, this rule is in play. So that is in the updated list of council rules of procedure in order to reflect state law. And then the consent agenda items, we just referenced another section of the existing council rules of procedure and code of conduct, so that if someone was reading that, they had a cue to look at the other section that talked about the time frame, hoping to get those by 1 o'clock so we could let the rest of the council know if something was pulled. This section of Rule 5 is really Clerk Geisler's special space. So we are going to have her come up and present some of the clarifications that were made in order to try to simplify the Roberts rules in the code and in the council rules of procedure.
Thank you, council members, Mayor Norton, council president. So Rule 5 in our rules deals with motions, and you did have a couple of items via consensus from the study session that came forward in this section. I also have received quite a bit of feedback over the years from people in the crowd at meetings, from staff, that the motions as they are currently in the old version, if you look at them, they're kind of a mix of rules and definitions put together, and they're because of that, it kind of creates some contradictions. And so since we were making some changes, I asked Administrator Helms to let me include a reorganization of this section purely for clarity. There aren't really any changes except for what you all asked for clarification wise, but the reorganization does make it look quite different. And I'm going to point out to you here going forward what those clarifications are. So first we're looking here. you all brought up a concern about amending a motion, not really capturing what's actually happening. I think what it says now makes it seem like you can only make 2 amendments, like period. And so I rewrote this to read what it actually is. And I'll just, briefly read it here, is that you may move to amend a pending main motion, and then amending that main motion may not go more than 2 amendments deep. And then a vote must occur to dispense with the most recent amendment. Second tier motions to amend must be germane to the first amendment. And all amendment motions must be dispensed with before a new amendment to the main motion can be made. And so that's an accurate capture of how that rule actually works. And so that's the recommended language for that. We also had a request to clarify to lay on the table versus to table. And so we've added a little clarifying blurb in the list to cover for that. There we go. Okay. So next is then going on to just explain some of the reorganizing that I did. And I'll give you an example, is that the first paragraph talking about seconding a motion used to say all motions must receive a second, and then except for, and then it gave this incomplete list. And then if you read farther down, you'd see additional things that don't require a second, and that would start creating some confusion, up to and including having community members giving me written feedback during meetings or coming up and talking to me about it during breaks. And so I thought this is a good chance for us to reorganize this in a way that makes more sense. So we're separating some of the definitions from the rules. And then we're laying out here, like in seconding, that it's generally motions must receive a motion. And a motion that has been seconded cannot be withdrawn without the express, you can read it. I don't need to read it to you, but, and then I've broken out a separate section of motions that don't require a second. And so we have that clearly defined in a list and not in a run-on list in a sentence that we can't refer to by like an individual number. We want to be able to refer to things individually.
Clerk Geisler,
Yes.
can you withdraw a second after discussion has started? Or does it have to be like, I second?
So
I
a
withdraw the second.
seconder, without us defining it any other way, if we were to refer to Roberts, which we do with Rule 8, a
Yeah.
seconder can withdraw a second at any time. The only thing you can't withdraw is a motion that's been seconded. So the motioner cannot withdraw, especially once discussion has been started. The only way to dispense with the motion then at that time is to just vote it down.
So if you second and then discussion starts and then you just withdraw your second, you have to call for a second again.
Yes.
Okay, Right.
So,
don't do that. Just kidding.
well, and I mean, I think if we can, talk about this another time, but if you were to sort of dig into the Roberts rules behind that, it's usually predicated on some new piece of information
Mhm.
that the seconder didn't have at the time. So,
Yeah.
So let's see, we did the list of additional, so now we are calling this out in a separate list. And that's really it. I mean, we're defining seconding a motion more generally so that it's a definition, and we're not putting a rule and a definition in the same, list where it's not clear. And then you'll see, I'm seeing now that I didn't add a slide for this, but there's an additional change too, where then I've then made a definition sections that says defining commonly used motions. And it's got all of our regular motion definitions that were already in there, but they're all listed under one subheading. And so we can, is it in here? Oh, it sure is. I guess I didn't print that page. Well, my bad. So yeah, you can see that here is then I've now consolidated all of those definitions under one heading instead of them all being their own separate headings, which is also, I think, kind of confusing. And then I've added some additional descriptors to 5I under precedence of motions, noting Councilmember Keen, who's commented on a number of occasions that is not really the section to define all of those things, but I think it can be a quick reference guide, whether something requires a second or whether it can have debate or not, and what order it should go in. And so I've added a few descriptors for those kind of things, along with the clarification on to lay on the table versus table. All right, so that's it for me on Rule 5. Anybody have any questions regarding reorganizing of the motions and the clarifications that
That's
you all
great.
asked for?
Thank you for that.
Okay. Stuff out of here. You take one. Thanks.
And now we know why Clerk Kiesler is a certified municipal clerk. She knows lots of things. Did a lot of
I
training.
guess, pause, Councilmember Kirkpatrick did have a question for Clerk Geisler. Sorry to
Maybe
make
I
you get.
can wing it.
Well, maybe you can wing it. Let's go for it. Making a motion to dispense with the previous motion.
I believe that would be calling the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't, yeah,
Or do you
that's-
mean-
so that doesn't need a second if you're calling the question. Dispensing with means you're voting on it.
Somebody makes a motion, it's seconded, we have a discussion, and then somebody motions to dispense with the previous motion.
Which is calling the calling it for a vote. What are you trying to say? Getting rid of it?
Yeah. Yeah, what would it be to get rid of the prior motion that was made so that you wouldn't
You
vote
would
on
either
it?
be amending
Hold
it,
on.
you would be trying to amend and get a second to the amendment, or you would be
Second.
voting on it and voting it, hoping it voted down.
You can't withdraw a motion that's been seconded, is what Clerk Geisler said.
But the seconder could remove their second, which would make it.
Go ahead, clerk.
Patrick, are you
Okay.
focused on the language where I said dispense with the previous motion? I- is that-
Perhaps.
Okay, so what that just means is that you have to deal with the motions, the amendment motions related back to the main motion before you can make a new amendment. So
There's a
vote on
schematic flow chart for this.
there is, and I can certainly provide that to you.
I want the visual.
But I
Awesome.
was
Okay.
trying to select words that
Yeah.
help you sort of verbally follow
Yeah.
the train in and out.
Yeah, okay, I think I get it then. You're
I
gonna,
I
the
will
seconder
provide
would
you a flow
remove
chart.
or, okay,
I
thank
have
you very
one.
much. I appreciate it.
Provide it to everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Clerk Kiesler. Robert's rules is a secondary language, so we're all speaking our secondary language when we do the Robert's rules. So just a couple of other things that came up during the study session. So the organizational meeting, boards and commission liaison appointment appears to maybe have even been something that came forward, maybe copied from some other rules that another city had. And so we're really looking at here addressing those annual appointments to the various boards, defining the roles in relationship to those appointments and the seating on the dais. And so the language that you see here clarifies that that will happen through a survey, and that in the first, I believe the first meeting in January, maybe it doesn't say that, those come forward, and they come forward as recommendations from the council president for the city council to dispense with through a motion. And so that is trying to really, it takes like 3 paragraphs and makes it into a paragraph to try to simplify that process. Also tries to clarify that some of these are in ordinance, some of them are in state law, and a number of our committees and commissions that are established by ordinance actually clarify who the members are on those boards and commissions. So some do not, some do. So it's a little bit, we have a sheet that we also provide to you that clarifies those things. And that's that document that shows approximately when the meetings are, who had been appointed previously, and what the enacting language is from, either ordinance or resolution, state law, et cetera.
Mayor Norton has a question.
Yeah, typically we bring those names forward the last meeting in December so that people can start their work on their boards in January. That's what we've been
We
doing.
always do it
approve
at the
them in
first meeting
January.
of the
We
city
were talking
council.
about 2 different things here.
Yeah,
We
I'm
were
talking about boards and commissions.
Boards and commissions.
These are the council appointments.
Yeah,
So
that's what-
this is the
Okay.
appointments that
All
are.
right, and I was looking on there and it also said, okay,
Yep,
it's just,
apologies.
okay, thank you.
And then the seating had some odd language in it, penultimate, things of that nature. And so we tried to simplify the language, which talks about the seating order that you've had, where it begins with the mayor on the left, and then councils 1 through 6, and council president in the middle, with the city administrator on the far right. So just tries to simplify that language so you don't have to get a thesaurus when reading that language in the council rules of procedure.
I have a question about this.
Councilmember Dennis?
So, when did the mayor and city administrator start to sit on the dais? I mean, how long ago was that in our history?
I believe that was maybe back in 2018. Or I think the mayor has been there for quite some time, and to my knowledge, at least in the initial iteration of the council rules of procedure, the seating on the dais included the city administrator, and I believe the initial enactment of those was 2018.
Because I know other city councils don't have that
Every city council is different.
dynamic, so,
Many of them have both the clerk and the city administrator at the dais. Sometimes they have the city attorney at the dais. It really just depends on the city council. And so what was discussed during the March 13th study session was bringing forward clarification of the existing seating.
okay. Well, I just, from this past year, there has been some issues, I believe, where the city administrator has expressed issues sitting where she perhaps is at because of
That's
dynamics.
completely
so maybe we
inaccurate.
could,
I've always
look
been
at that.
fine sitting wherever the city council would like for me to sit as a whole, which requires a 5/7 vote of the city council to change.
Well, I'm just saying if it's an issue with personality stuff, I'm sure we could. look
Madam
at
President,
different-
this matter has been discussed previously. I think we can probably move
Alright,
on.
let's move on.
So the Council Code of Conduct, Chapter 2, we also had some adjustments from that study session, trying to, again, enshrine in one place the recording and broadcasting of meetings. I guess this was from the enactment in January of 2023 that clarified the official city council meeting live stream would be via the live stream and the online feed, although of course we always do try to also get those out over cable. As you maybe are aware, we have now one cable provider starting in March of 2024. So that landscape has continued to change. Many folks are actually not subscribing to cable anymore. So want to stay ahead of that and make sure that we're doing that whenever possible, but also recognizing that in some ways the live stream is the most reliable way of getting that out. We don't have entire control or much control over the cable companies. And so sometimes their equipment is the challenge and sometimes it's ours. But that is now included, not just in a resolution, but in your council rules of procedure so that people can find it more easily. And then
We have a couple
Yep.
of comments. Councilmember Kirkpatrick had something still on seating, and then I'll let Councilmember Bransford go ahead. Just a second. Let Kelly Ray first.
All yours. Yep.
I did have a question about seating. I believe the last council was seated alphabetically, not by ward.
I think it's changed throughout time, but I believe that it's been by word for quite some time. So, I mean, again, it's up to the city council. This is what was discussed in March and there was consensus to bring this forward in this way. And there was a fair amount of discussion about whether or not you would change. There are councils that rotate their seating, but again, the way that your council rules of procedures work, it would require a 5/7 vote to change that. So if there was a reason to change that in the future, it's something that the city council could do.
Okay, well, I just wanted to bring that up. Of course, my position wouldn't change. I'd still be sitting in the same chair. So
Leave it to the
was trying to
K.
get away
Leave it
from
to
me
the
'cause
K.
doesn't really matter, but just wondered if people might want to do that to switch it up, because I'm always here and I don't have a choice to move, but I might like to.
Forward today, so I notice her when I look left. Member Bransford, go ahead. Mark,
Not random.
Mark.
Oh, I think I'm gonna save my comments for the end, not to disrupt the cadence.
A lot of good flow right now, so.
So again, this is really taking what was approved in January, putting this in your council rules of procedure and code of conduct. This is again related to the regular live streaming, and it talks about both the regular meetings, emergency meetings, which happen occasionally, but we hope they're rare, and then closed sessions and references the appropriate statute. And then also the council study sessions. Obviously, sometimes those are more offsite, and so some of those can be challenging to record. And one of the things that we try to do is if we're recording something, we want it to be a quality recording. I know we're not always successful at that, but we're investing a fair amount in trying to make that viable And so this really, again, is just putting in your council rules of procedure, what was approved in January of 2023. Then there are also, in order to have this in one place, you do have a section in your code of conduct about travel policy and expenditure. It generally references the existing travel policy. It also talks about out-of-state travel and pre-authorizes the U.S. Conference of Mayors, NLC events, as well as the, I'm going to get it wrong, Urban Land Institute, ULI. And so this is also explaining sort of the process of making sure that that is occurring effectively in accordance with the travel policy and the approval in December where the dollars are apportioned and we come back to council if something might go over. So that's in one place again and not a separate resolution. Then just a couple other things that came up during March. There was a conversation about pulled items and making sure that there was clarity about this again. So we did a couple minor changes for grammar, moving some sentences around so it was much clearer about what the intent was here with regard to other business. Again, it's encouraging language. It's not, obviously there's things that could happen and it's always up to the Common Council about the consent agenda and pulled items once the consent agenda has been established. But this is, again, trying to get back to what we talked about, or most of us talked about back in January of 2021 about trying to have consistency in information and being able to provide information to the council so that you can be prepared for your meeting. And now that would actually, with the calendar change, if that occurs, provide you a little bit more time to go through those between the 1 o'clock and 6 o'clock meeting, if that is what is approved. This was also discussed on March 13th, is clarifying language about sort of the implementation side and the day-to-day operations of the city, which happens through administration and city staff, and the policy side of things that happens through the Common Council as a whole and the majority of the Common Council, and just trying to get this clarifying language. And the request was to try to come forward with something that would be more clarifying, and we hope that we hit the mark here. For that. But again, just clarifying some things that are in the charter as well as throughout the rest of the council code of conduct to try to keep the back and forth that sometimes occurs on different items with the professional staff that have the work and are typically either enforcing, whether that's the law or making sure that we're following through in a way that reflects our existing ordinances when we're working with the team.
I think Councilmember Kirkpatrick had a comment, but do you want others to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay, Councilmember Wall?
It went fast enough that I neglected under 202C. A question from the community has come up as to what an experiential study session is. We might have a difference of meaning of that. Can you define that for us?
Well, it would be those types of council meetings where you're not sitting around a table when or you might have where you're getting up and doing some activities together. So an example might be some of the activities you did during the learning sessions with Bethany von Steinberg's when you're taping out the floor and different parts of the room where there might be a dining experience, et cetera. The bus tour. So when we're out and about in the community, or if we did some training and had you go through the wastewater treatment plant, things of that nature, it's very difficult to really record that functionally since you might be having like separate conversations. We don't anticipate you voting during those meetings, but it's to have that experience as a common council and elected body together to be able to have that experience of on the ground in a way that isn't a voting meeting or a study session sort of style where we have a little bit more of that common back and forth, Robert's Rules of Procedure, some version of that, and a little bit more, I guess, formal decorum at the meeting.
Thanks, very helpful.
I have a, yeah, so
Councilmember Kirkpatrick?
Yeah.
And then Den.
Yes, I am. And I'm actually going to piggyback off of Councilmember Wall because I found it in my notes. I rewrote this section slightly. My general feeling about some of the rewrites in this document is they feel that they feel to me that they're written in the negative instead of being written in the positive as this is how we all should be. Many of them also felt punitive, and I know we will not be the last council under the charter for the city of Rochester. So I tried to rewrite some of them in just, a strong bureaucratic active voice that would suggest that this is the way we all behave. And this one isn't too terribly different, but should I send it to Rachel so it can come up, or can I just read it?
Voting on it.
What would you prefer, Councilmember Kirkpatrick? You like the visual?
I got it.
Just read it.
I'm gonna read it. Okay. Council study session meetings will be available to the public via the city's official live stream and or the city's YouTube channel and broadcast live on cable when the meeting is hosted in the council chambers. Study sessions hosted in a location without the capacity to live stream to our online feeds or broadcast live to cable will be recorded, rebroadcast to the government access channel, and archived. Exceptions to the recording of meetings allowed by Minnesota Statute 13D will only occur when the meeting environment, example given, tours and outdoor meeting locations, does not allow for recording equipment in future broadcasts. So I'm making a statement that's in the positive, stating that we will always be recording unless we have something. And I don't know, it just feels different to me. It feels more that we're coming from an obligatory stance, that we're actually trying to meet the mark versus we're just not going to meet the mark here because we don't have the ability to.
You're
do it.
actually going much farther than the mark by all of the way that you handle your meetings. This
Okay.
is
I
far
think you're-
above and beyond what the actual open meeting law
Maybe
requires.
it's just the way I'm reading it or the way I felt.
I
it
think
was
if we're,
read.
I'll just offer my perspective on this, like, if we want to rewrite the whole thing, we'll never get the council rules of procedure adopted.
I don't want to rewrite the whole thing. I just brought up 2.02C, like Mr. Wall did. And that was one of the
And
4
there
or
could be
5 that
meeting
I.
room locations that are inside that don't have the ability to effectively like record and broadcast the meeting.
I guess, I guess to me, that's a concern because I see so many things being recorded on social media. Now, I do understand the quality concern. I do understand that we are doing something that that is at a local government level. However, we pay communications people. Certainly we have a tripod. Could it be edited and then put, I don't know. I'm just thinking.
But to actually pick up all of the conversation, depending on how the meeting room is set up, I think would be very challenging. If you don't have microphones, if you don't have, like, there's a whole lot that goes into that.
I'm not sure she
depending
was
on the
actually saying
experience.
anything different than what's in here.
She is.
Okay, but I guess the other suggestion is then, I guess the other suggestion is then we don't have the meetings in those places where we can't record.
So we can't do a bus tour,
Surely we can record on a bus tour.
but you wouldn't be
somehow.
getting everybody's comments. It's just
Not
very,
we're
they're
not
open to the
conducting
public, so the public can come on the bus.
Yeah.
Okay, I get
Media
that,
comes
and
on
that's
the
good. I
bus.
get that. We've had the public join us on the buses.
We've provided typically like an
Yep.
outline of where we will be, so if they wanted to drive themselves or meet in a specific location, they could also get a decent idea of when we think that we will be at that location. So
Okay, I'm just sharing that this is a concern of mine, like Mr. Wall was concerned about the experiential piece and wanted to bring that forward. I'm just sharing. Thank you for listening. This is a dialogue between colleagues, so we can all
I
make a
like the idea
decision.
about being more positive rather than negative, but I think the language they have on here, I don't want to lose some of that language, and you left a little bit of it out. So if there's,
Tightened it up.
Yeah.
I
Tightening it
I
up,
use
took
less
out-
words.
right,
There's,
took out
which
the
is something that I think both Clerk Geisler and Administrator Zelms had said, is that just shortening the document because it had just had a lot.
I guess I would just ask that you
send.
send it to
Yeah, I will.
administration
I
and
will.
if for consideration, and if
I
it
will.
makes sense, it can come forward.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Dennis, then Palmer.
So I think, and I've mentioned this before, we need to have good government, not quick and fast and speedy. So I think if we need to go through each one of these and redo them, then we need to go through each one and redo it. I feel what Councilmember Kirkpatrick has mentioned is completely valid. Transparency is trust. I don't know why the city staff is so scared about transparency, because it just shows that we are going to relay information and be able to be accountable for our words. So there is technology today, and I've seen incredible there's technology today that can record everywhere. And I don't necessarily appreciate these absolute statements where, well, what are we gonna do? Not have it on the bus? I mean, yeah, we can record on the bus. I've, there's recording things. Everyone, the bus, I believe, even has a camera. But you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But I think that we need to record every single meeting, because this whole idea of experimental session is incredibly subjective. What's an experimental session? I guarantee you, from everyone I've talked to, February 27th was not experimental. That was an official government strategic planning meeting that was not recorded. And look at all the stuff that's happened from not recording that meeting. So I
Dennis,
feel
we got
this-
your point on the recording. Can you move to your next point?
Well, I have 15 different things to add, but I haven't been holding off. I can do that at the end. But that is a really important
you
issue.
move
And
on to the
I've
next
looked at other
point?
council rules and procedures. And I mean, just all over, people are embracing bringing information out and connecting residents to their local government. And I don't see why Rochester city staff, the bureaucrats, which is the city staff, is being so against having transparency.
Point of
and
order.
accountability.
Point of order. I just counted 2
Derogatory comments.
derogatory
towards staff,
comments
Which isn't
that
allowed in our council
that
rules.
that weren't even facts. They were incredibly subjective. And I think we're here as a body to speak objectively, to
Could
do
you
our.
enlighten me on those?
Yes, I will. The last one, help me out, somebody, my recall is for the
Scared of
best.
transparency?
Yes, scared of transparency.
Well,
Thank you.
that's my
Bureaucrat and
feeling. I
bureaucrats.
feel that people are
Please
scared
state
of
that, Councilmember Dennis, then please
every
state,
single thing I say is my
feel
opinion.
that. Then you need to preface things like that, because we don't hear that it's your opinion.
I
We
feel that
hear-
this
Excuse
council
me,
is
I'm
scared.
talking.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I called point of order. Please preface that these are your opinions, your subjective comments, because I believe, which is what I'm doing right now, stating my opinion, that most of us, when we hear you speak that way, we become offended because they are fallacious statements and they don't belong up here on the dais. In my opinion. Thank you.
Right, can we move on to the next point, Councilmember Dennis? Otherwise, Councilmember Palmer's ready
Well, I
to
have
speak.
15
What
comments.
I-
I can.
What I would like
Later,
to
I
know
can-
is, are there 5 people on the city council who agree with what's written? If there's 5 people, let's move on. If there's not 5 people, we'll not have a change.
I mean, I think it's looking good, but we absolutely will have a chance to talk it through when it comes back to us as a formal recommendation. So this isn't the final opportunity to speak
Well,
to
I
it.
believe it is the final opportunity. I think that you're looking for 5. The schedule is 5. The study session change is 5 already.
But
I
during
mean-
study sessions, we don't need to say how we'll vote. So I just want to say generally, I'm
Feedback is
supportive.
always appreciated, to
Yes.
be quite
Well, if
frank.
the staff don't have an idea and we don't know what's going on, we're just going to repeat the same conversation again and have statements made that doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
5 people is what controls this agenda, not 7.
And I just point out that the vast majority of meetings are held in a place where they can be recorded, live streamed, and put back up onto the council meeting part of the website where they reside. It's just a very, very small handful of times where it's beneficial to the council, the decision makers elected by the people of Rochester, to be able to have those experiences in a way that isn't just sitting on the dais for a camera, but to be able to absorb the information and use that for future decision making.
And we do record more meetings than our fellow government entities here in the community. Councilmember Kirkpatrick, go ahead.
I guess the flip side of the coin is I actually really appreciate the creativity that's been given for these locations. Wow, the opportunity to ride on an electric bus. We got to see the new Cascade Station thingy that's out there at the Cascade Park. I never go over that side of town. That's
Going to
not
look
true.
at the plows and the.
Yeah, I mean,
winter
I really
equipment.
applaud what staff has done to make all of these really neat opportunities for us to become more aware so we can be better at our job. I just hope that the public is really, really aware that they can join us on these things if they're not going to be recorded. I'm just looking for a little bit of balance there. That's really my point.
Thank you.
Go on.
All right, let's keep going.
So the next item, I think I actually already went through this.
Yep.
And then chapter 3, connecting residents with staff resources we had gone through. And then clarifications on Appendix A. I actually forgot the slide was in here. So if Clerk Giesler wants to be out there ready to help me. So this really is clarifying language after the council consensus on March 13th to reflect that there's no limit on speakers at public hearings. So during your actual public hearing portion of the meeting, there isn't a limit to the number of speakers. So if everyone spoke for 5 minutes for 5 hours, technically that's an option unless the council would want to intervene in some way. And then the written material really just clarifying for members of the public that they should be distributing those to the city clerk, who then approaches the dais in order to pass those out. And then talked about the calendar month for time limits, just for clarity within the document. This might be a time where you would want to talk about, if you wanted to talk about the open comment period, but I did have a question. This has continued to come up. It came up at the last meeting on whether or not there is any interest in having a shorter amount of time for each person speaking. That actually seemed, even with 2 minutes, that there were a lot of people that could be heard in a pretty succinct fashion. But I know that council president and mayor, when they have met with some of the other boards in Rochester, so Rochester Public Schools and the county board, that perhaps there would be, if there'd be any interest in looking at a 3-minute time frame. Typically in my experience, when people come prepared with that time frame, they're able to meet it. Even off the cuff, they were able actually to do that during your council meeting last week when there was a 2-minute time frame applied. So just something for consideration. It did not kind of get support. There wasn't a change that got broad support on March 13th, but wondering if there's any desire to talk about that again now or not.
I definitely would support a discussion. This is something that the mayor and the county and school board chairs and I have discussed and aligning across our entities. I think that we are having a lot of speakers, which is great, but perhaps shortening the amount of time would allow people to be concise, share their messages, but have more people have that opportunity to do so without extending it at a significant amount of time. Somebody over here, Councilmember Palmer? Then.
Well, I was one back in March that wasn't really thinking to try it, but I think the last 6 months have proved that we need to do something differently in our period. One is I would like to eliminate phone calls in. I don't think that was helpful. If you have a comment you want to make, you can email it to the city council and it becomes part of the public record. And so I'm not in favor of phone calls at this time. I think if we're going to have 6 spots, if it's 4 minutes each or whatever it's going to be, that we eliminate just to have the 6 spots. I do like 2 minutes. I think that's a legitimate 2 minutes is enough to be able to speak for your ideas. If you need more than 2 minutes, I think that you could ask the city council at the beginning to say, waive your rule and let me talk for 4. I think that what we did last week, where we had some people talk for 4 and some talk for 2, is not really a legitimate way of doing it. The other side of that is I don't think that towards the end of the day that you have people who are sitting here who are doing business that they're, 2-3 hours could go on before we eliminate speaking. So my thoughts have changed, and I'd be willing to, if we have 5 of us who don't want to have phone calls come in, I think that phone calls are something that we did during COVID and prior to other city councils, we didn't do it. And so if that's your basis for making decisions, then you would not be for phone calls.
Thank you, Councilmember Bransford.
2 or 3 minutes. I think 2, when I sat on the other side of the dais and came before the city council, I always made sure that I was really crisp. After about 2 minutes, sometimes it gets rambling. And it also gives more people a chance to speak. So 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I definitely think shortening it would be useful. The other thing that after much experience with open comment period is germaneness to city business. And of course, that's a slippery slope. It's hard to define, but it's kind of, it when you see it, that it's off the rails a little bit. So, you know, someone standing up there, and I think you used the analogy of talking about Babe Ruth's hitting career. You know, it's a public forum, but it's also city business. And if it's nothing that we could ever act upon, if it's not a city policy or, you know, even chastising us for how we do our job, fine, go ahead. I mean, that's germane to the city, right? You can poke holes at what I do all day long, but if it's about many other far afield things, it would be good to have at least a discussion about what germaneness might mean and how we might incorporate that. I have no idea, and maybe we don't at all. But I think that that's fair in the sense of allowing other people who have come to actually talk about city issues that are germane to our ability to vote and have policy on is fair to them. So if you have 3 people lining up talking about Babe Ruth, you actually eliminate other people that may want to come and talk about clean water, right? Or the sports. I mean, so there's a very strong argument to be made that not only giving a little less time helps more people come, but also sort of restricting the topics to germane city issues also gives more people time to come to us and address things that really matter to us as policymakers to address.
That's well said. I don't know if the clerk and attorney have any comments.
Maybe I can start off while they're thinking with their
Okay,
legal minds.
sure.
Perhaps an idea would be to bring forward something that is, to Councilmember Kirkpatrick's prior point, more positive and encouraging. So we could encourage that and maybe provide some examples and the why that we were requesting people to focus on items that are more germane to city business. In other words, business that the city council might have the ability to act upon. So federal law, I suppose you do have a legislative agenda, but some pieces of that you don't really play a significant role in. Some of the comment, baseball, which some of you have a significant role in baseball, but not as a council member. And so those, we can try to take a shot at it. I think, again, it would be helpful to have a little bit of feedback on, from you today on how that's feeling, like not feeling great, feeling like taking a shot at providing some guidance, to try to speak to the reasonable person test about germaneness, recognizing that while we might know it when we see it. I would just also point out that there are a number of communities that are moving away from the online open comment. There has been a plethora over the last probably 8 weeks of sort of that Zoom bombing that had started happening occasionally during the pandemic with hate speech and things of those nature. I'm very fortunate that we haven't had that happening in Rochester, but as it had started primarily in California, and then as most recently as last week or the week before, there's a community up in the Twin Cities that still does the online commenting that had quite a lot of negative, really terrible rhetoric.
Mhm.
So just something to offer to you that is a risk that we run.
All right. Councilmember Kirkpatrick, then Keen.
Sure, I will. I was just listening to some of this. I did back in March 13th, had some thoughts and I didn't get enough traction. I probably wasn't articulate enough, but listening today, there's a couple of things in flight. What the length of a speaker, and I like the 2 or 3 minutes. As far as the overall time on open comment, I'm okay with it being as long as it is, or maybe a little longer, because I think it is. I don't find it a bad way to spend our time, especially at the beginning of a meeting. So I'm not trying to do this to, get away from hearing from the public. As far as remote versus in person, I would be for in person. Although I don't mind the idea that if there's no one else here, does somebody want to speak from the Zoom meeting? But I'm okay with not having it. I'm still trying to understand handouts. I don't know how about my peers, but I'm always distracted when someone comes and giving me stuff and I'm trying to listen, and maybe that's something that could happen outside the meeting, but I don't know how. As far as we try to do this thing that, you should be heard once a month, and I think we have some sort of, it's a calendar month. I would support sort of a guidance that says, if you've spoken at the last meeting, you don't speak at the next. or something like that, like every other. It just seems easier to implement than, I come at the second meeting in November, then I can do the first meeting in December. I just think it's kind of messy. This last topic on topic management, I've spoken to Councilmember Ransford about this outside, and I just think it's difficult. The only logical or the only kind of enforceable way I would see this is just from the president being able to say, this is not germane. I don't think we can create a standard that says if it has to do this, I just think it's too, but it's like the old standard as we talk about it is when it's off topic, it's off topic. But I don't want to try to write into our rules what that means. But those areas I am open to and would support like change to this, but I also don't want to, I want it to be upbeat and I want to hear from the public.
All right, Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. Echoing a lot of what everyone has said. However, a couple of differences. Again, we claim to be the city of sustainability and resiliency, yet we are going to demand people to get in their cars and drive down here to speak at open comment instead of being online or on the phone. I'll just leave that right there and not talk about that one anymore. Second thing is I guess like Mr. Keene says, I really enjoy hearing from the public. They are who put me here. I don't work for you all. I work for those people out there and I enjoy that role. I love the partnership that we have to do our work together for these people out here. Earlier, I believe it was either Clerk Geisler or you, city administrator, had said something like when the sheet's full. I'm sorry, the sheets should never be full. Put a second one, a third one, a fourth one out. As I think we had 2.5 sheets the evening of the environment stuff that was going on. So I'm all for that. I was kind of against shortening it, but after listening to hear what everybody says, yeah, you got to take speech class in high school. We can work with others to compose our thoughts and to be more succinct. I know I need a little help with that sometimes, but so shortening that for open comment, I guess I have concerns about public hearing. I want to learn a little bit more from you all about why maybe public hearing people should have more time than open comment period, or maybe it doesn't matter. But then also, please help me to understand how we can empower our chair to address someone who comes up to open comment and immediately stop them when they say something that is happening on a federal level that is not under our purview or even within our jurisdiction.
That would be good. Yeah.
So how can we do that? How can we put that into our policy to say, thank you for coming, but that is not a city council matter? I appreciate you attending this evening. The next person on the list is Joe Smith. Let's hear from Joe Smith. Because I think that is really very important.
I think I could start with the public hearing versus open comment and then go to City Attorney Spindler Craig about some of the challenges that present themselves with deciding what's germane and what is not germane. However, the public hearing is something that's agendized. So it's something that you're taking action on that night. It's something that is the people's actual right to be at. Open comment, there is not a right by statute. It is something that you are providing the opportunity as a city council for people to have a forum in front of you. They have many other forums that they can be in front of you, and some of them choose many forums to be in front of you. But it is for things that are not agendized, or for something that's on, as we have seen before, folks come forward on something that's on reports and recommendations or on a consent item and feel the need to speak before you, before that meeting. But those are typically, there are city councils that have open comment at the end of their meeting. There are a lot of different ways also to host public hearings and still comply with the open meeting law. But the 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes for a public hearing is really because there's information in the packet. It's something that people are responding to. It's their right in the public hearing. And I didn't hear that that would change if people wanted to join remotely for public hearing, but that's a separate section of your city council rules from the open comment period, because the open comment is really for people to come forward and on something that either isn't agendized or is not agendized as a public hearing. So that would be the difference. They're reacting to something that you're going to vote on. That's
That's
Yeah.
really great. I knew that, but I guess it wasn't in the forefront of my mind. So
Yep.
thank you for explaining that. I
think it's
guess I can see them being different times now, but you just brought up something that was a part of, I've lost it.
Well, do you want to weigh in on whether we could interject if it's not germane?
That was it. Sorry, that was it. Sometimes I think community development or some of our other departments have a better handle on whether this particular matter that's being spoken about is under our purview or not. For instance, somebody wanting to put a big building or something there, well, under the new UDC, that doesn't come to us anymore. It goes to them. So maybe these folks would say, this isn't something that comes under your purview anymore. So would we have the ability to reach out to you all to say, you're right, this isn't under your jurisdiction, let's hear from the next person? Or that's just my add-on, I guess.
typically we just answer them if it's something that we can answer after the fact, either on email, we catch them on a sidebar, or give them a ring. With
Madam
bated breath.
President, council members, mayor, yeah, so the germaneness conversation is tough, and it's tricky, as I think many of you recognize, and to the extent that we're indicating in part that it's tough to write it down, it's tough to describe, that is part of the quandary, of course, but certainly understand the point, as Councilmember Bransford has made, to the extent that we can keep the discussions focused on things that are really relevant to your day-to-day business and your voting, your decisions. That is a helpful thing. I would just tell you that nationally, this is absolutely a struggle for bodies like yours. But I think what I hear you saying is that you really want to take a closer look at what sort of structure and language could be utilized to achieve that goal, to try to encourage public comment, to be more focused on the things that you have some control over. But exactly the tools and the language to achieve that, I think we need to spend some more time on that. We, of course, don't want to put the council president in a tough spot of essentially trying to monitor the content of what's being spoken on in public comment on the fly. Maybe at the end of the day, we can come up with language that gives enough guidance for that to be a manageable task, or something that could be tried, piloted for a period of time. So my only other suggestion would be you seem to also be considering some specific options to change on public comment, whether that's shortening time period or this conversation about in person or online. Perhaps you can give direction, try to achieve consensus on those items today. The germaneness conversation, I think, needs to come back to you. We can spend some time looking through some specific options that try to achieve what I think I hear you suggesting.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Palmer?
Well, I think it's important for everybody to realize that we're not trying to eliminate public comments, and we're all, I mean, everybody has said, oh, you know, what a great thing it is, and I agree with that. We're just trying to make it so that we have more availability for people to speak. And I think we also have to remember that our rules are our rules. They're not anybody else's rules. And if you hear somebody up there speaking at any point, somebody can say a point of order, and you can say to the president and say, I don't agree with this comment, or I don't think this is appropriate. And she can say yes or no. And then you could say, I don't like your opinion. And four of us could say, we agree with the president or we don't agree with the president. So it's our meeting. This is not hard to do. So if somebody gets up and says something that talking about Brazil, I don't care about Brazil at this point. I can say it's not germane and she can say it is or isn't, and you can disagree with her or vote for her. So I think we have to remember that.
All right, Councilmember Dennis?
Thank you. So I feel that government exists to serve the people, and we need to be on, have our finger on the pulse of what's going on in our community. So I feel it's important to have as much time as needed. I don't even think we should have a time limit. We should just, whoever comes and signs up, they should be able to speak. I think if we start at 6 and people come late because of issues, we should say, hey, we're gonna take a break here and we're gonna let people come and speak at open comment at 7 if you can't make it at 6. I think we should do everything we can do to enable people to have a voice. I feel that, and I use the word feel, I know everyone's a wonderful public speaker. I'm in Toastmasters and a lot of other things trying to work on that, but if I don't use the word I feel or I believe, I just want to say it's coming out of my mouth, and that's my perception of these comments. So please note that in the future, if I forget or I get busy, I forget to say I feel or I believe. But I believe that President Carlson does a good job of reminding people when they come to speak. She says, could you keep it as brief as possible, respectful, focus on city issues. I think that's what we need to do, is just a little reminder at the beginning to say this is what our expectations are. Because when we start to limit the First Amendment in any way, and I believe it creates a liability for our city and it's just unethical. So I don't think we should even talk about what is germane. I haven't seen people talk about baseball or things. And if they want to come and they've had the reminder, then I think let's just see if it is perhaps leading into an issue or whatnot. So I do feel that's something. And then the accessibility, as Councilmember Kirkpatrick, not just sustainability, but we preach all over that we are an inclusive and compassionate and accessibly focused city, and to take away the ability to have people call on a phone would negate all of those. I believe there is so many reasons why people need to have the ability to be virtual, and we should never limit that. I have complex issues. The city has a lot of complex issues, so 4 minutes is I think a very reasonable time. People often don't go to 4 minutes. Oh, someone spoke on this item, I'm not going to go through the whole time frame. But to give them at least 4 minutes is just, I think, very reasonable. And our system is confusing. So trying to limit things and have people rush through something. I've talked to many people after the fact and they said, oh, I felt so nervous. I mean, it's very terrifying to come and speak in front of people. And so to have that, buzzer, give them a little time to collect themselves and voice their opinion, because that, I believe, I feel, is the reason I am up here, is to listen and to hear what the concerns are. And then I want to go back, and I know there's a lot of other issues, but I want to go back. I think we skipped over it real fast. Right before this slide, there is one on Council Code of Conduct, Chapter 3. And I'm very confused with the wording. It says council members are encouraged to generally avoid addressing individual community member issues during other business. It goes on and on. I feel that is a very important time for us to listen during open comment and say, there was a question. Can we address that on record? Can we get an answer? Can we clarify? Can we acknowledge that this was an issue? The city administrator and the mayor have really unlimited time to do their reports, right? They can sit up here if they wanted for a half hour. We have the very end of this council session to be able to do other business, which used to be 6 times a month. And then it was voted to be only 2 times a month. So we're already shaving off an incredible amount of time for council members to voice concerns that they hear. But I would like some explanation on how or why this is even in here. I believe it's very subjective, and I believe that it negates a huge reason why we are here, is to amplify the voices. And when people take the time to speak, I think the least we could do is try to get some of these big questions or just clarifications at the end of the meeting for those residents.
And just as a reminder, I do say during open comment that if there's a question, staff will follow up. So it isn't that we aren't addressing the issues, it's just that we aren't responding in real time to what people are bringing up. It's certainly an opportunity to speak with staff further about a concern that you're hearing, but the mayor and I represent 120,000+ people, so working one by one through council issues just isn't always an effective use of time. So I think that that's sort of the idea behind that, but go ahead, Administrator Zalms.
I'm sorry, you can go ahead and respond.
I mean, it's
I'm-
based on the conversation on March 13th that the Common Council had
Yeah.
together, and there maybe wasn't a unanimous support for this, but it's to try to make sure your business meeting is a business meeting. Oftentimes, folks come to to open comment and leave right after open comment, so they're not even here to hear the answer. But
I was just going to respond to two different things. One is back on, let me start with the open comment stuff. Two points, and this is based on the discussion we've been having. I actually recoil with the idea that I want the staff to like protect us during open comment, and if something comes up, you jump in. I'd rather not have that. I mean, I just think that's not what we want this council to be dealing with. So if we can't work it out through our leadership and this process that Councilmember Palmer brought up, I actually did not, I mean, in my reading of our rules, that's not part of what we do during open comment. I'm fine if it is, but hasn't happened in my 5 years where someone would say point of order, this is out of hand and take a ruling on. But if we go that way, maybe that's fine. I don't expect it'll come to play that much, but
I mean, the meeting isn't even called to order yet.
no,
So
I understand. That's why I'm saying that that was something that I took a little different, but I'm really responding badly to this idea. Is there some way you guys can jump in? Because I don't want that. So I'll just say that here with my peers. Then going back to this 3.04, again, I did get some feedback on this, that this is like, again, this is this idea of like, well, the staff is responsible and we really are not. And I don't like that. But what I think of what I read here is really going back to your first chart where it talks about policy and process and then operations. And I think this is, I mean, I think it's an important role as an award advocate to link residents. Like, I don't know what who does tall grass or who does boulevards, and I think it's good that we try to link them to staff. But I also, it's not in here, but I also think there's a role that needs to be done, that idea of like escalation of like the staff is out of, not doing this right. And I think that is a ward thing. Now, I don't think I think what we're doing here is important, and I support it. But I guess it's unwritten that when people say like, you shouldn't be like grinding out my stump in the middle of winter or something like that. I mean, if they're saying like, I've already dealt with staff and they've told me they're doing this and I don't think it makes sense, I think that's a valid thing for council members to make sure we'd say like that as an escalation point to residents. So I don't need you to react to it. I mean, I'm kind of supporting what we did here, but I'm just sort of saying we're not like abdicating that and saying like, well, the staff said it, what can I do about it?
And I think that's the intent of and requesting follow-up as needed is focusing on the department head and city administration so that it isn't, say, with the person that went out to actually issue the citation for tall grass and weeds, but it's
Right.
at that sort of policy level of, have we been doing this for the last 25 houses, or are we making a change for this one person, or is it something that needs to be something that's
And that's
important
why I
change?
support this, because I think that idea of that like advocacy towards like an exception, give an exception for them, that's why I want to stay away from. So
the mayor's been waiting to speak for a long time. You have the floor if you're ready for it.
Well, one of the nice things is a lot of people have said what I was going to say, so that's a positive. I think what I've seen today really moves us in the right direction. I was disappointed that I didn't see, after all the work that President Carlson and I have been doing, talking with the school district and the county, I was hoping to see that 2 or 3 minute change. So that we are aligned with the other governmental bodies locally. I think it's helpful for constituents that they know, which place do I speak 2 minutes or which place do I speak 3 minutes if we can come into alignment. I think 3 seems reasonable, but if you want to, that's fine too. And when I think about this, I think back to when we were all running for office and we go to our forums and we're given sometimes 2 minutes, often 1 minute to answer questions about what we feel is important to this city. And we have to be concise and we have to think about it. We have to answer it. So, people make their judgment based on 1 and 2 minute things that we say to get elected. I think asking the community for 2 to 3 minutes when they're coming and in advance, knowing they're coming to make a concise statement is reasonable to ask. And I think the 4 minutes has been a little long, and there's a lot of rambling that goes on, or 75 different things that gets brought up that often aren't relevant. So I like that idea, and I hope you can come back with something after you've heard the comments here, that there does appear to be some agreement to shorten the time a little bit. I'm pleased about that. I'm struggling a little bit with the phone calls. I do think there are people in our community that have disabilities, that have challenges. They might be sick and they might want to bring up something. I like that we're able to offer them that option, but I also, understand how difficult it is to manage a meeting when you've got someone online and someone here, and who do you get your preference to? It's a challenge. So I'll just leave that there. I think we have to remember every governmental body, whether it be city, state, county, Congress, have hearings and do take community input. But all the input that we take isn't at that meeting for those 20 minutes. Right. That's an extra opportunity that we give, and we allow access to television, which is why some people utilize it, as opposed to some of the other governmental bodies who just have a public comment period. Sometimes it's in Rochester, tends to be right before the meetings. In other communities, they have a whole afternoon that they set aside. It's public comment time, and all of us would show up and people could come in over a period of several hours, and there's no cameras. It really is an honest communication between a council and their community to really listen. And they give a lot of time to that. That's not what we do in Rochester. We have this little short period of time that we have people come in, but I think we need to remember it's not the only time. Our jobs as elected officials are to spend our lives out there talking, and we do, with community members every single day. And we get emails and we get letters. And so I think we have to remember the importance of that short 20 minutes isn't the be all end all. It's just one additional opportunity for people to be able to have contact with us. So I just want to kind of put that in perspective. It is not unusual at the legislature, on committee hearings, in Congress, and the county, where you have to limit yourself. You have to have some rules in order to be able to get the business of the council done. And public comments are just one little bit of that. So I think it isn't limiting a person's First Amendment rights to say that, we have rules. And the rules are you can speak for 2 or 3 minutes, and the rules are that you need to be germane to city topics. That isn't a First Amendment right issue. That's setting the limits for how you're going to run your meeting. And your meeting is, we want to hear from you about the city issues. And I know, Council President Carlson, this is really hard. But as the chair of a meeting, if it goes off the rails and people are racist or people are saying things that are mean about a staff member, you have every right to use your gavel and say that's inappropriate and I'd like you to sit down, or start, switch the subject and talk about something that is relevant until your time is up. So I know that's hard, but that's the responsibility of the chair. And I think your colleagues have to support you in your ability to do the very best you can to keep us working well and to keep the community limited into their discussion. And I trust that you'll do that.
Councilmember Palmer?
Ms. Elms, 2 quick questions for you. When you go up to the state, either from the city council or as a staff, do they allow you to phone that in, or in how much of a time frame do you have when you get to speak up there for public hearing? Or for
It's really up to the chair and it's up to the body. So it can change depending on who the chair of the committee is. Sometimes they select the order, sometimes it feels like the order got selected for a reason. They also could say, we're only going to hear one person from each side. It's really completely up to the chair, whatever committee you're speaking at up at the legislature.
And you can gavel someone down if they're inappropriate.
Yep.
But don't we send staff up that they only get to speak for 1 minute on a subject as last year?
Yes, there's any amount of different rules, but again, it really depends on the committee chair, and it's often very short period of time. And it's entirely governed by the chair and deciding what's the right length of time.
So if 1,000 people show up, they don't allow 1,000 people to speak?
I've never seen them allow that many people to speak. It's usually quite narrow and they will let you know ahead of time that they are approving you to speak.
Thank you.
Point of order, could we take a break? It's been over an
Are we
hour and a half.
close to being complete with this item or no?
We can take a quick break.
Okay.
I think we have a little bit of discussion left, so let's just 5:15, quick bathroom break.
Didn't say baby.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Yes, yep.
Welcome back. We're just waiting for Councilmember Kirkpatrick to take her seat.
Come on, hop along.
Actually, while you're settling in, I'll just comment on the online speakers. I've been struggling with this too because there's no, it's a strange sort of lack of prioritization because they can call in and raise their hand at any time and then they just are inserted. So as we consider this question, I feel torn because I feel like people should be able to call in. This is a nice thing that we have accomplished in creating more access for opportunity. And also people are making a special effort to come and speak and we want to make sure they have a chance to speak. So I don't have a good solution to this, but it is something that I've been grappling with from a running the meeting perspective. It would be nice not to have to be watching for people who are joining online, but I also appreciate that that does give access to people who may not otherwise be comfortable or able to make it into council chambers. Councilmember Brandsburg.
So at the last planning and zoning meeting, this very thing came up and the chair said, I'm gonna give precedent to the people in the room. We're gonna go through the list. And then after they were gonna take phone calls, council person said, no, let's not do that. But I mean, there's ways to slice and dice this where, you know, you can still do it, but you know, I don't know. It's hard because you're right. We definitely want people to be able to call in if they have a disability or, you know, no means of getting here. So
And not necessarily, I know we allow people to ask for accommodations ahead of time, which is great. And also not everybody is necessarily aware of how to do that or able to. So just trying to be thoughtful about creating access, but not having just unending open comment time.
Yeah, I would just say from a staff perspective, I don't think we would be ready to bring something back to you that would be well thought out by November 20th. And that would get you a consensus on that and address both of those things, as well as on the question of like spelling out germane. I think we would be able to put some basic information that says, what encourages people to come with information that is germane to the meeting, but it's probably that sort of a sentence for now until we really look through it to make sure that we aren't creating any issues for you.
And
And I would just always point out, as you have done at other meetings, you have the ability to interject and request to suspend your rules. So for example, if we came back with 2 minutes, and I think the example was given this evening, if there's 2 people signed up and they have some really juicy topics, you can always suspend your rules and allow them to speak you could allow them both to speak for 10 minutes if you really wanted to. But that's sort of the nature of your council rules and why it's a 5/7 vote to suspend your rules or to change your rules, because it's your collective way that you would be managing your meeting in a way that allows you to be reflective, but also, you know, all of those other different types of input can come in different ways, but also you have the open comment.
And I think that's fine. Really, it's been very limited who's been calling in. So it's not like we're overwhelmed with the number of virtual callers. And certainly during public hearings, we want to give people an opportunity to call in. So I think it's fine to sort of continue to explore and think about what might work in the future. Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
I'm just gonna suggest that we use caution, with perhaps assumptive phrasing such as special effort to make it here. We have no idea how much special effort is being executed on behalf of certain individuals to use a Zoom meeting and or to call in and press *9, to hear that at the pace that perhaps you're delivering it, and then to find their phone *9 and perhaps they pushed the wrong button and they've accidentally hung up.
Sure. Thanks
So
for
I
that
just, yeah,
feedback.
we have an incredibly diverse community that I am proud to represent a portion of. And I, like everybody else, we want to be able to hear who's talking.
Sure.
And just before we took a break, I wanted to echo what Keen was.
Why did you move your microphone away?
Oh, thank you. No, pull mine here. Oh, why did I move? Yes. Cause I'm a dork. I don't know. Hey, I make mistakes. I'm a human. Hey, so the other piece was that, like Keen was saying, we were elected. We were placed here by the people. So sometimes you all don't hit the mark and they call us to whine or complain or to give a legitimate beef that, this particular department is razzing me around and I want you to do something about it. That's kind of our job. But I think that, I think maybe perhaps you, Mr. Spindler Craig, had commented about how I work with my constituency and always a comment and then bringing staff in. But I always give a direction that I want to be kept in the loop or to be notified about how this ends up or to be, please reach out if there's something more I should know about if I feel that this particular person may need more help or it's just a really funky thing. And that's why we're here. So yeah, that's all.
Councilmember Keen?
Yeah, I think we're closing down on the open comments thing now. The one thing I would say, going back to, I do feel for President Carlson, like how to control this and how to do these things, but this is a place where staff might really be able to help, where we would just run the meeting as if it's in the room. And if staff could say, there's someone on the phone that would like to, I think it would give the feeling that we're all present here and we would still be giving that ability to connect to somebody who's coming in, as opposed to the chair, just because you got somebody standing there going, is there somebody else to, and that's what I'd like to try to stay away from. So I think we could maybe accomplish both with some staff help.
Is there a way for you all to kind of GI that? Sorry, not GI. Diminish you.
Engineer.
Yeah, engineer that so that you've already got them on cue and you are able to talk to that caller and say, can you press *9 so I can hear you? And then everything is all set up so there wouldn't be anything more that
I think there's a couple of things that we could do. We could have up on the city clerk's office is already looking for people online and whether or not they're speaking. The other thing that we could perhaps do is have a slide up that indicates that to unmute, press *9 so that it's sitting up on the screen if they're watching it on the dais. But like that other type of interaction starts to create challenges to the open meeting law because it would have to be a chat during the meeting. So we turn those off.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate everything you do to.
Yeah. All right, Councilmember Bransford?
Yeah, just a couple closing comments for me. One thing that I think would be useful in some of what Clerk Giesler did, I really liked, was kind of separating out definitions. And it might be handy because I've been sitting, like in planning and zoning or meetings out there and people go, what's a report and recommend, or what, so a little glossary of like, definitions of what each of those sections are meant to be, like what is other business? What is its intent? What is it used for? What is a public hearing and why do we have them? Just a teeny little glossary of definitions, not way overboard, but it also kind of lets us know too, like brand new green city council person might not understand what other businesses have been historically used for, or what is a report and recommendation, and what's, some of that is at the beginning of the January year when new council members come in, a little bit of education, just a little glossary might be useful. And just a little comment on interacting with constituents and being that bridge. I'm actually in the middle of a situation where I shouldn't have included a member of the city and trying to hash out something, and then they came back with a little terse. For me, it's kind of like, and you've stated this before, Mr. Keen, that, knowing when to back out. Like, I'm going to help, I want to see some resolution here, connecting the dots. My role is kind of like, yeah, I don't understand. But what I try to do at the beginning is forward emails and say, hey, what's your opinion? Help me get back to that person with XYZ so I can explain it to them, and try to keep angry constituents from badgering, which can happen. And if I see that happen, I try to just go, back out. So it's a fine line. It's hard to know when are you really helping or when you really are kind of going over the board advocating for and maybe going a little too far. So it's for me, it's kind of just use common sense when I think, you know, the conversation is and should be over.
I think there's a really important point to keep in mind, and I can't remember what presentation it was, maybe when we were talking about the 311 system, about how many thousands and thousands of calls and requests for help the city gets every month. We see a fraction of them, and most of them are going directly to staff for help. So we are helping as intermediaries to get people to staff. And if we see something that's coming up, either it's not being resolved and there's a serious concern with something going on with staff, or many people are bringing it up, that's when we start having more of a policy conversation around it. So most things can be answered by staff. If there's a concern that's important for us to discuss, then that's our opportunity to talk to staff further about it or talk to our colleagues on council to bring it forward as a potential discussion item. That's my perspective. But I don't usually deal with the sidewalk and tree concerns in my role, so I have a different relationship with constituents. Any final discussion? Councilmember Dennis?
Yeah, I have a, well, quite a few different points. So maybe it'd be nice to have this continued to another study session as well. So some of these recommendations and thoughts can be incorporated. I know we have the council room on Wednesdays. So that I think in our growing city with population wise, we should take advantage of as many study session opportunities as possible. So that would be my recommendation, is to have another study session on this because it's very complex. I can't even see my printout of the study calendar that people are referring to. So just to make sure everyone has the same information. But to go back to this section 3.04, there's, I mean, this wording, I think, and we've talked a little bit about already, but it's very subjective. And so when we talk about, you know, when I talked about First Amendment issues and things like, it's not that a lot of this stuff in here is very subjective. Staff can say, well, was that, or council could say, what was that, this definition, reading through this council packet or this rules and procedures, which is a little bit confusing because the changes aren't necessarily highlighted and you have to go through and just double check. But I've been looking at other rules and procedures of other cities, and I'll just grab West St. Paul's here, which is 8 pages long. And the city of Rochester has what, 21, 22 pages on our, this is much more positively worded. It's much more precise. It's much more focused, I believe, on the roles of city council. I'm sure there's a lot of other examples. I just have this in my hand. The last 2 pages of St. Paul's, I'm sorry, West St. Paul's city council rules and procedures is a code of ethics for public officials. And we don't even have that to my, I mean,
Councilmember Dennis, that's actually in your city ordinance.
I think this would be something to bring into this as well, so that we can just have it more accessible. I have a little segment as they do as well, because there's been issues that have been brought up. One of this comments here, it says that day-to-day community interactions, council members need not act as intermediates between the city teammates and community members when advocating for a community issue brought directly to the council member. That is, I mean, and it goes on, but this is a issue where there's been so many residents who've come to me with a question and been very specific that they do not want their name brought to the city administration. And they said, can you get this answer for me? Can you look this up? Or we have a question about this. And they do so in fear of retaliation. It's a real legitimate fear. The city administrator, a city attorney has a track record of digging
Madam
into
President.
personal.
This
It
is
is,
actually
it
a
is fact.
violation of
It's
your
a
council
fact.
rules.
It's a fact.
Madam
And so
President, can I
people-
speak?
Yes, Mr.
I would
Spiller
like-
Craig has the floor. Go ahead.
Just a couple of things. I guess you get to decide how you want to spend your time now going forward. But yes, things like bringing up ethics questions, or earlier in this meeting suggesting that it's unethical for the city council to be considering certain policies. It's just loose and unfortunate and dangerous language, frankly. Yes, Councilmember Dennis, I think, understands that we do have an ethics ordinance, an entire ordinance format built out into our code. We can certainly go back through that with her if that's a concern, not today. And yes, absolutely, we've had this conversation many times about a suggestion that a resident has a concern and is scared of city staff. And I've just been clear with Councilmember Dennis that I think that is nonsense. And it's not something that staff is going to engage in. If there's ever a situation where she's prepared to have somebody speak with city staff, a department head, or the city administrator, we're happy to have those conversations. To the extent that a few of you have brought up those situations where you think a citizen has, a resident has had some issue with city staff, absolutely bring that to the department head, bring that to the city administrator. We want to hear those things. We will problem solve through those situations. We understand that those things can happen, actually, so we want to hear about them. But the notion that we've heard over the last 2 years of there's all these residents out there that are fearful of us and won't provide their name, so therefore there's nothing for us to actually do about it or respond to, or try to speak with somebody to actually understand and respond to their issue. If this really is even a real thing, of course we
Okay,
would.
point where I don't like to be, this questioning of intent and a credibility is not part of this
Well,
discussion.
yeah,
I'm speaking from a fact that there are
Member Dennis,
dozens.
we have gone through this
No,
ad nauseam.
This is
We're
this
done.
is exactly what.
I'm
Please,
not
please,
gonna
no,
listen
no,
anymore
if you don't
to
like to
this.
listen, hear what I have to say, that's one thing. But this is
No.
legitimately part of this.
Wrap up.
There is no need for a council member to have to give up names of residents
Okay,
who do
we're-
not want
We-
their names.
Councilmember Dennis, this is
Urgent
actually
concern.
how your
We
charter
just-
works. The charter that was approved by the people of Rochester that talks about the form of government, which is different than West St. Paul.
Okay, I'm talking
Okay,
about this
Councilmember
ordinance
Dennis,
right in
we're
front of me here.
done. We're just done with this
No, please don't scold
conversation.
me. Please, I do not
Yes.
appreciate
And I'm not gonna engage with
I
you,
have,
so let's
this is
wrap
a
up.
council study
Could I
session.
share what I would intend to bring back for the
Yes.
Common Council? Because part of this is also to assure that we're representative of the Common Council and the majority of the Common Council who are all elected, not any one person's voice isn't overly shared. Is that we would be bringing this back. We've talked about it numerous times with some disagreement from some people, but on reports and recommendations, most likely, I would argue it could probably pass on consent, but I imagine it would be pulled. So we would be focusing on making the adjustment to clarify 6 p.m. for meetings and making sure that when it's on a Wednesday, that it's clear in the council rules of procedure that that's consistent. Looking at a shorter time frame so that more people would be able to speak under open comment and be aware of what that is up front, recognizing, as all of your rules are, that any one of you can make a motion to suspend your rules. And then perhaps some slight adjustment to germaneness to encourage people to speak on things that are germane to the city council. But I think it would take us a little bit more time and maybe some future vote. We've had a lot of consensus around what's before you right now, not 100%, but consensus isn't 100%. That's unanimity. So bringing that back on our reports and recommendations so that the Common Council, and we can determine if there's 5/7 vote on all of this, or if there's an amendment that would be made according to the Roberts Rule. So that would be the intent, is to bring this back under reports and recommendations at a meeting before the end of the year. Could be November 20th, but we have a number of public hearings that are likely to come forward on that based on prior actions to City Council.
All right.
Right.
I think we're gonna wrap up.
I have two things in closing though that I just wanted to. One is I did get comments coming into this meeting of like, that people seem to have the wrong impression of why we were doing this. And I want to just make sure everyone knows this is a normal part of our option. Councilmember Palmer and I back in 2019, and by the month of March or April, had a meeting where we talked about how we're going to change our rules. We did the same thing in 2021 when new members came in. We did the same thing in 2023 when new members came in. So this isn't anything we're doing because of, solve some problem. I mean, the calendar stuff is good. I just want to talk about these two things. There's parts of these things that are, we call them the rules, but there's hard rules in there that says, these are things we can look at and we can check and say, yep, this is the order of these things. But there's a lot of this that's soft. It is like we call by 1 o'clock or do this by these days, or this is what things for. And frankly, they're impossible for the staff to enforce and hard enough for us to enforce as a group. But I think what we're trying to do is set the standard we want to operate on for the next year until we get new members again, and then we want to look at them again. But I want to make that point here that just because we write these things down and things have to be done by 1 o'clock, or you must give a reason for why you're pulling something, or you have to do it this way, they're not enforceable. They're just us saying these are the standards we want to work towards. And I think we can try to enforce them across ourselves. But the fact is, this is where some of our dissent comes from, because we disagree with our rules. And I hope we get better by having these discussions and moving forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Kirkpatrick, a final thought and we're done.
I'm sorry, I guess I neglected to bring this up, but it's somewhat important to me. And again, it's a piece that I rewrote, so I will definitely submit it and then you can submit it to the whole council. But this is page 47, Article 2, Code of Conduct, Chapter 1, Roles and Responsibilities, 1.01, Whole Council. Is that a slide that we had pulled up? Is that maybe why I wasn't able to address it?
I don't think there's any changes that were recommended.
I guess maybe it's me that's recommending one, and of course, I want you all to see it, but that very large paragraph, I've shortened significantly, and so if maybe we could bring up page 47, possibly, Article 2, Code of Conduct, Chapter 1.
I can read it to you if you want, but I mean, this is really a key component of how your charter operates with the
Yep.
day-to-day operations
Yep,
and the policy level. And
I
I
understand.
think if you provide it in its similar context, that we
It's
could
similar
take a look.
context, but it adds one big thing, which I think has come up a fair amount today in our conversation. We are not just a policy-making board, we're also an oversight board. You bring us things that require our vote, that require us to go, whoa, okay, yeah, I guess we got to address this. Not oversight as in reprimanding and that kind of thing, but the other version of oversight. So what I wrote was the council is a policy-making and oversight board. The council works together on relevant decisions of a policy-making nature and functions at the citizens' elected representatives as the citizens' elected representatives to the city government. All council members, including those serving as presiding officers, have equal voting authority and are given equal respect.
I think it's also really important. There's a piece that's missing from what you rewrote that talks about it is important that the council and the city staff work together to differentiate between administrative duties, which are relevant to staff, and those decisions which are of a policy-making nature. And so that's also, again, because as a whole, you are a policy-making board and an oversight board, but not as individuals if it's not consistent with the policy-making that this or prior councils have made. So
Right.
that's what that's trying to distinguish, is that the policymaking is how you exert your oversight, is through policy, assuring policy is implemented as it was approved by the city council, assuring that if there needs to be a policy change, you bring that forward either through a council initiated action or it's something that comes up in your strategic priorities or something of that nature. But those are things that happen collectively as a common council. And
Okay, so with that, then I will just put this in here and maybe it can be incorporated, and you're right, maybe I left out that important piece, but I was just trying to just shrink it and make it more concise, just a little more active voice, a little more bureaucratic voice. So yeah, that's the only other thing that I wanted to bring up, because I just feel that's really important. We're not just a policy making body. We have that other piece to us that I think is important, and that's why we're here. So, and I appreciate that
Yep.
and the work and the effort that we do to do that for our community.
So I have a point of clarification. Councilmember Kirkpatrick mentioned you were gonna type up something and send it. I was told that we cannot do that and have it sent to all council members. Is that correct? Because I have a lot of
For
things
to
about
send it to
emails, different.
administration.
She's gonna send it to staff and we're gonna look and determine whether or not it aligns with the charter and the intent of the council rules.
of us can send anything to the city administrator and ask the city administrator to distribute it, I believe.
Oh, see, I was told otherwise that would be a
I
breaking
think
up.
you're misinformed. I
Oh,
think you're
by
oversimplifying how
Mr.
the
Spindler
open
Craig.
meeting law
Okay.
works.
But so it is okay then for me to type up these things and then have you distribute them to the entire city council. Is that correct?
No, we're not asking Kelly to distribute to the council. We're asking administration to consider whether they align with council's priorities in the revision process. And whether they would come back to us for vote.
Okay, but
Takes
because
five votes.
the city
Yes.
count, this document is made by, this is the document of the council, not the document of the paid staff. I feel like, you know, as an elected official, it's a very sacred obligation to make sure that we have say in what governs.
And it will come back to you on a public vote of
Independent,
the
you know,
common
to-
council, not any one individual council.
Okay, but I
member. It
do have,
requires
I do have a
5/7.
list of things I would
be
like
happy
to,
Go
take
ahead
those from
and
you.
send.
I will,
Send them
share
to
I would
me.
like to have my colleagues have knowledge
Put
of
it in
this.
their box. Go for it.
Okay, so you will distribute it to the
You
entire
could
city
just
council
put it
when I
in
send it to you?
in their
I just want
council
clarification.
boxes. Yep.
You will distribute, okay, so.
No,
I-
Jen-
No, I want to be careful here. I don't want to, it's not a policy that we can send something to you and tell you to send it to everyone
Right.
else.
I don't.
That's
just
your
do
judgment
what you
on
tell
whether
me.
it's
I use
relevant.
my judgment to determine whether or not it is per the charter, something that should go to the
So you
remainder
can
of the city council.
subjectively say, I won't send anything of
And-
Councilmember Dennis's, but you can, I think that should not, I just would like
Well,
to
to
know that this
clarify-
information.
To clarify, I think I've only asked you to do that once or twice in the almost 3 years that I've sat on the council. It's not something I do all the time.
Well, I just heard a different email about that, so I wanted to clarify. So I've heard that was a breaking of the open meeting law to request that. So, but I have a few other items I would
All
like
right,
to
we're-
have
but-
time to bring up, please.
But we have decided to end the meeting. We need to get to the review. You are welcome to share your additional feedback with administration, but we are done with the meeting for today. So I will say it's over and then we will adjourn to the executive session with Mr. Spindler Craig saying
Yes, if I may,
what gives us authority to do that.
City Administrator Zelms, was there anything else for closure?
Nope, I think we're good here.
Thank you. Madam President, this is the type of closed session that does not require a motion to move into. So I would just state consistent with the published notice. The council should adjourn to a closed executive session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 3A to conduct the annual performance review for the city attorney, Michael Spindler Craig. We will be meeting in room 320. Everyone heard that? Room 320 at a time that the council president chooses and announces now.
All right, so we will meet, just take the time to walk over there and meet about 5:55, room 320. Yep.
Awesome, thank you.